The Oklahoma sun beat down on the dusty rifle range with merciless intensity. Staff Sergeant James Whitmore stood alone at the firing line, his weathered hands adjusting a scope that gleamed differently than the standard-issue equipment surrounding him. At 42 years old, his face told stories of deployments that had aged him beyond his years, but his eyes retained the sharp focus of a predator. The other soldiers whispered as they watched him from the observation deck. Some called him eccentric. Others called him dangerous. Command called him a liability. James had served 20 years in the United States Army, but he carried something unusual in his blood. He was born in Manchester, England, raised by a grandfather who had been a legendary marksman in World War II. Before joining the American military at 18, James had spent his childhood learning techniques that the modern Army had long abandoned, dismissed as outdated relics of a bygone era. The controversy began 3 months ago during a joint training exercise in Fort Benning, Georgia. James had modified his rifle scope with what he called a windmill reticle pattern, an angular measurement system his grandfather had taught him, inspired by calculations used by British snipers in the 1940s. The design allowed him to calculate wind drift and bullet drop with uncanny precision, accounting for variables that digital scopes often missed in rapidly changing conditions. Captain Rebecca Morrison, the range master, approached with a clipboard clutched against her chest. Her expression was a careful mask of military professionalism, but James could see the tension in her shoulders. "You know I have to shut this down, Whitmore. The brass has made their decision." James kept his eyes on the target 600 yards downrange. He had expected this conversation, had prepared for it, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to the gut. 20 years of perfect service, Captain. Not a single mission failure. My accuracy rate is 97%. That's higher than anyone in this battalion. Rebecca shifted her weight, and for a moment her professional facade cracked. "James, I know. I've read your file a dozen times. But the regulations are clear. Non-standard equipment modifications require approval from the Pentagon. Your windmill reticle system, as brilliant as it might be, doesn't fit their protocols. They see it as unreliable and proven technology. It's not technology. It's mathematics. It's geometry. It's the same principles that helped win World War II. The world has changed since World War II. Has it? Because last I checked, bullets still follow the same laws of physics." A group of younger soldiers gathered near the equipment shed, their attention fixed on the confrontation unfolding at the firing line. Among them was Lieutenant Marcus Chen, a rising star in the sniper program who had made no secret of his disdain for what he called James's old man tricks. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying across the range with calculated loudness. "With all due respect, Staff Sergeant, maybe it's time to accept that your grandfather's war stories don't apply to modern combat. We have laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, thermal imaging. We don't need to pretend we're storming Normandy." Several soldiers laughed, though the sound died quickly when James turned to face them. His expression remained neutral, but something in his posture made even Marcus take a half-step backward. "You ever been in a situation where your batteries died, Lieutenant? Where your electronics failed because of moisture or cold or electromagnetic interference? Because I have. 3 times. And each time, the old man tricks you're mocking are what kept me and my squad alive." Rebecca raised her hand, cutting off Marcus's response. "That's enough. Both of you. Whitmore, you have until Friday to remove the modifications from your rifle. After that, if you continue to use unauthorized equipment, you'll face formal disciplinary action. Possibly discharge." The word hung in the air like a threat. Discharge. After 20 years, after deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen classified operations that would never appear in his official record, he was being threatened with discharge over a reticle pattern. James nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Understood, Captain." As Rebecca walked away, James returned his attention to the rifle. His hands moved with practiced precision, checking the scope alignment one more time. The windmill pattern in his reticle caught the sunlight, casting tiny angular shadows across the lens. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, a gravelly Manchester accent teaching a 10-year-old boy the secrets of reading wind, of understanding how air moved across landscapes, of calculating angles that no computer could match because they required intuition earned through years of observation. The old man had fought in Operation Market Garden, had held positions that should have been overrun, had made shots that defied probability. And he had done it all with tools that today's military considered primitive. James squeezed off a single round. 600 yards away, the target shuddered as the bullet struck dead center. A perfect hit that the monitoring computer confirmed with a beep. Marcus watched from the shed, his expression unreadable. That weekend, James would receive a call that would change everything. A situation developing overseas. An impossible shot required. A mission where the modern equipment had failed, and someone remembered the staff sergeant with the strange British technique and the unauthorized reticle pattern. But he didn't know that yet. For now, he simply packed his rifle away, the windmill blade angles catching the light one last time before disappearing into the case. The following Monday morning, James reported to the armory at 0600 to begin the mandated removal of his scope modifications. Specialist Rodriguez, the armorer, avoided eye contact as he handed over the standard-issue replacement scope. Orders from the top, Sarge. Sorry. James took the equipment without comment. 20 years of service reduced to following orders that made no tactical sense. He had survived firefights in Fallujah, had extracted hostages from Taliban compounds, had trained 3 generations of snipers who now served in elite units across the globe. And yet here he stood, being treated like a reckless rookie who couldn't follow protocol. By Wednesday, the humiliation had spread beyond the range. During the morning briefing, Colonel David Hartman addressed the entire battalion. His words carefully chosen but their target unmistakable. We are a modern fighting force. We rely on tested, approved systems that have been validated through rigorous scientific analysis. Individual modifications, no matter how well-intentioned, compromise unit cohesion and operational reliability. We cannot have soldiers operating on folklore and superstition. The word superstition hit James like a slap. He sat rigid in his seat, feeling the eyes of 50 soldiers on him. Marcus Chun smirked from across the room. After the briefing, James found a formal letter in his mailbox. Mandatory psychological evaluation. Standard procedure, the memo claimed, for soldiers who demonstrated resistance to command directives and attachment to non-regulation equipment. That evening, James sat alone in his quarters, the letter crumpled on his desk. His phone showed a screensaver photo. His grandfather at age 90, still sharp-eyed, standing beside a restored World War II rifle at a military museum in Manchester. The old man had warned him once, during James's final visit before joining the American military. They'll try to make you forget what makes you different, lad. They'll want you to be just another cog in their machine. But remember, the machine breaks down. Training and instinct don't. James's phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca Morrison. I fought for you. They won't listen. I'm sorry. Another message followed immediately after. This one from an unknown number. Staff Sergeant Whitmore. This is Major General Patricia Vance, JSOC. I need to speak with you immediately regarding an urgent operational matter. Call this number. Time sensitive. James stared at the screen. Joint Special Operations Command didn't contact staff sergeants directly unless something had gone catastrophically wrong or impossibly right. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed the number. The voice that answered was crisp, no nonsense, and carried the weight of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions without hesitation. Staff Sergeant Whitmore. We have a situation in the mountains of Montana. Domestic terrorism cell. Hostages. Our primary sniper team failed to neutralize the targets due to unprecedented wind conditions in the canyon. Electronic systems couldn't calculate the variables. I've been told you can make shots other people can't. I've been told you have a technique that doesn't rely on batteries or computers. I need you wheels up in 2 hours. James arrived at the airfield 30 minutes later, his modified rifle case clutched in his hand. The same scope they had ordered him to remove now represented the only chance to save lives. Major General Vance met him at the helicopter, her silver hair pulled back tight, her face etched with the kind of stress that came from knowing American citizens were counting down their final hours. The situation is deteriorating fast. 6 hostages in a remote compound. The terrorists are ex-military. They know our protocols. They've positioned themselves in a canyon where the wind creates unpredictable vortex patterns. Our digital systems can't compensate. We've already lost one opportunity because the calculations were off by 3 degrees. James nodded, his mind already processing variables. Canyon winds. Vortex patterns. The exact scenario his grandfather had described from the Italian mountains in 1944. General, I need complete operational control. No interference. No second-guessing my methods. Vance looked at him hard, then extended her hand. You have it. Bring them home. The helicopter lifted off into the darkness, bound for the Montana wilderness. Inside, James sat across from a young tactical officer who briefed him on the target layout. The officer's name tag read Simons, and his eyes kept drifting to James's rifle case with barely concealed skepticism. So the windmill thing, Simons began, careful with his words. That actually works? James opened his case, revealing the scope with its distinctive angular reticle pattern. It works if you understand what you're looking at. Most people see random lines. I see wind direction, bullet trajectory compensation, and elevation markers all calculated through geometry that's been proven for 80 years. But we have computers for that now. Computers process data. They don't read terrain. They can't feel how air moves through a canyon. Can't account for thermal layers that shift every 5 minutes. My grandfather dropped 12 German officers in 7 minutes during Operation Market Garden using these principles. Not because he had better equipment, but because he understood that wind isn't just speed, it's architecture. The helicopter began its descent toward a mobile command post hidden in the tree line. Through the window, James could see the compound in the distance, a cluster of buildings nestled in a canyon that twisted like a serpent. If you're watching this and hoping James succeeds, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. What happens next will change everything you thought you knew about precision shooting, and you won't want to miss how this unfolds. As James stepped onto the ground, he felt the wind immediately. Chaotic, swirling, coming from 3 different directions simultaneously. He closed his eyes, letting his grandfather's training take over, feeling the air currents like a language only he could speak. Colonel Hartman's voice crackled over the radio from back at Fort Benning. Staff Sergeant, this is being broadcast to command. Don't make us regret this decision. James adjusted his scope, the windmill blades catching the moonlight. I won't, sir. I never do. James positioned himself on a rocky outcrop 800 yards from the compound. The distance was extreme, but the elevated position gave him the angle he needed to see into the canyon's throat, where the terrorists had established their stronghold. Through his scope, the windmill reticle came alive. Each blade represented a different wind calculation, angles his grandfather had taught him to read like sheet music. The air moved in layers here, cold currents from the mountain peaks colliding with warm updrafts from the valley floor, creating a rotating column of unpredictable force. Target acquisition, James whispered into his radio. 3 hostiles visible. 2 more probable inside the main structure. Vance's voice responded immediately. Windows of opportunity are closing fast. They've threatened to execute the first hostage in 12 minutes. James pressed his eye closer to the scope, watching the windmill blades align with environmental markers only he could interpret. A flag on the compound's roof twisted northeast. Dust near the building swirled west. Pine branches 200 yards out bent south. The wind wasn't chaotic, it was a puzzle, and he had spent his entire life learning to solve it. First target acquired. Hostile on the roof. Taking the shot. His finger found the trigger. Breathing slowed. Heartbeat steadied. The world reduced to mathematics and instinct, geometry and experience, present moment and grandfather's ghost guiding his hand across decades. The rifle kicked. 800 yards away, the terrorist on the roof dropped instantly, his weapon clattering to the ground. Confirmed kill, Simons reported from the tactical position. How did you? Second target. East window. James adjusted 3 degrees, compensating for a thermal shift he felt rather than measured. Another shot. Another body falling. The compound erupted into chaos. Terrorists scrambled, trying to understand where death was coming from, how their carefully chosen position had become a kill zone. Third target moving to the hostages. James's voice remained calm, but his hands moved with urgent precision. This shot required perfection. The terrorist was using a hostage as a shield, only his head visible above the civilian's shoulder. His grandfather's voice echoed across the years. When everything depends on one bullet, lad, you don't think. You become the bullet. James exhaled halfway and held. The windmill reticle showed him the path, showed him how the air would carry his round, showed him the impossible angle that would thread between wind currents and find its target. The shot rang out. The terrorist's head snapped back. The hostage stumbled forward, alive, confused, free. The remaining 2 terrorists broke cover, attempting to flee toward vehicles hidden behind the compound. James tracked them with mechanical efficiency, his modified scope making calculations that would have taken a ballistic computer 30 seconds to process. He needed 3. 4th target. Fire. 5th target. Fire. 7 seconds. 5 confirmed kills. The compound fell silent except for the sobbing of terrified hostages realizing they would live to see tomorrow. The extraction team moved in immediately, securing the hostages and clearing the compound. James remained in position, his eyes still pressed to the scope, watching for any remaining threats until Vance's voice confirmed the all-clear. Staff Sergeant Whitmore, you are cleared to stand down. All hostages secure. 0 casualties. Outstanding work. James lowered his rifle slowly, his hands finally beginning to tremble with the adrenaline release that always came after the trigger was pulled. He had done it. 5 kills in less than 3 minutes, in conditions that had defeated the military's most advanced technology. The helicopter ride back felt different. Simons sat across from him, no longer skeptical, now reverent. The young officer kept glancing at the rifle case as if it held some kind of magic. I watched the whole thing through the tactical feed. Those calculations you made, they defied every computer model we ran. How is that even possible? James looked out the window at the Montana landscape passing below. My grandfather used to say that war isn't fought with equipment. It's fought with understanding. The Germans he faced in 1944 had better rifles, better scopes, better positions. But he understood wind like it was a living thing. He taught me to see what machines can't measure. When they landed at Fort Benning the next morning, James expected a quiet debriefing and returned to his quarters. Instead, the entire battalion stood at attention on the tarmac. Colonel Hartman stood at the front, his expression unreadable. As James stepped off the helicopter, Hartman approached and saluted. Staff Sergeant Whitmore, on behalf of the United States Army and the 6 families who will see their loved ones come home, I owe you an apology. I allowed bureaucracy to blind me to capability. I confused standardization with excellence. The colonel turned to address the assembled soldiers. What happened in Montana last night represents the highest traditions of military service. Staff Sergeant Whitmore accomplished what our most advanced technology could not because he possessed something no computer can replicate. Hard-earned wisdom passed down through generations, refined through experience, and applied with courage under impossible pressure. Hartman faced James again. The Pentagon has requested a full briefing on your techniques. They want to understand how a 70-year-old methodology outperformed 21st-century systems. Your scope modifications are no longer banned. In fact, we're establishing a new training program and you're going to lead it. James felt something release in his chest, a tension he had carried for months finally letting go. Captain Morrison stepped forward, a rare smile on her face. Congratulations, James. You proved that sometimes the old ways aren't outdated. They're just waiting for the right moment to show their worth. That evening, James called his grandfather's number in Manchester, forgetting for a moment that the old man had passed 2 years ago. The voicemail picked up, his grandfather's voice still there, preserved in digital memory. James smiled through unexpected tears. We did it, Granddad. They finally understand. 18 months later, the Whitmore Precision Shooting Institute occupied a newly constructed facility at Fort Benning. The building's entrance displayed a bronze plaque. In honor of Staff Sergeant James Whitmore, and the legacy of Manchester marksman traditions that bridge generations of excellence. James stood in the main classroom, now promoted to Master Sergeant, watching a diverse group of 30 soldiers from 7 different countries work with modified scopes that incorporated his grandfather's Windmill reticle system alongside modern technology. The fusion of old and new had created something neither could achieve alone. Lieutenant Marcus Chun entered the room, no longer the cocky young officer who had mocked James on the range. He carried a rifle case and approached with genuine respect. "Master Sergeant, I wanted you to know that I used your techniques during the operation in Yemen last month. The wind conditions were impossible, and my digital scope failed exactly like you said it would. But I remembered your training about reading terrain, about feeling the air currents. Made the shot. Saved 3 Marines." James clasped his shoulder. "That's what this is about. Not proving anyone wrong, but making sure our people come home." Captain Morrison, now Major Morrison, joined them with a tablet showing news coverage. The Montana rescue had sparked a revolution in military thinking. Universities were studying the mathematics behind the Windmill reticle. International militaries were requesting cross-training. A documentary crew from the BBC had traveled from Manchester to interview James about his grandfather's legacy. The story had even reached James's hometown. The Manchester Military Museum had created an exhibit honoring his grandfather, displaying the original rifle alongside footage of James's Montana operation, Bridging Generations. When heritage saves lives, the exhibit was called. James's phone buzzed with a message from General Vance. "Congressional hearing tomorrow. They want to discuss integrating traditional skills training across all branches. Your presence requested. Well done, Sergeant." That evening, James stood alone on the rifle range where this journey had begun. The same firing line where he had faced humiliation and potential discharge. The target stood at 600 yards, unchanged, but everything else had transformed. He opened his rifle case one final time, running his fingers across the Windmill reticle pattern that had caused so much controversy. In the fading light, he could almost see his grandfather standing beside him, that Manchester smile, proud and knowing. Sometimes the world needs reminding that wisdom doesn't have an expiration date. Lad. Technology advances, but truth remains constant. James smiled, closed the case, and walked toward the future he had helped create. If the story moved you, if you believe in honoring those who came before while building something better for those who come after, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the